All right. Welcome to the Wisdom Factory, a forum for people who have knowledge, experience, and wisdom to share with the world. We're in Season 2, which is all about wisdom technologies. This is episode number 6, and we're calling it The Predicament of Western Civilization. And today we have invited Nicholas Beecroft, who, as the expert,
He's the expert of this day.
He is. He's a consulting psychiatrist, and he recently put Western civilization on the psychiatrist's couch and stripped him of all his illusions and prescribed what to do next. And it was a very entertaining time. The book was serious, but very, very readable. And I highly recommend it.
So first we say hello to him.
Yes, hello Nicholas.
Nicholas.
All right.
Yeah. Now I want to say some words about the Wisdom Factory.
We didn't say who we were yet.
Oh, didn't we?
I didn't.
Okay, do say who you are.
I'm Mark Davenport, and you are?
Heidi Hörnlein, or
Okay.
Adelheid Hörnlein, if you can pronounce it in German. So, we have founded the Wisdom Factory, and it is hosted by our non-profit, which is called Paradiso Integrale. We are in Umbria, here in Italy, and we invite you to come over. We have also guest rooms, and one of our programs is bringing people together, virtually and in person.
Yes, anytime you're between Florence and Rome, you're near us, so do stop by. Mm-hmm.
In this season, we have a sort of a sponsor. This is iAwake Technologies, which help you to overcome stress and deepen your meditation, and you can also recover from undesired behavior. And if you want to know more about it, listen our very first talk with John Dupuy of the Season 2 of the Wisdom Factory.
Yeah.
And now we talk about us in our plan. Yeah. It was too early. Okay, we want to present us in a few words. We are deeply inspired by Ken Wilber's work and the integral worldview, and that's what we want to promote here a little bit on the internet with our Wisdom Factory sessions. It has helped us to understand so much better the world and the contradictions which I personally felt before. How can that be, which sort of breaks your head into different sections. Mm-hmm. They become clear when you dive into the theory. And I think, Nicholas, it's also your experience, and you are deeply involved in Integral. So we are looking forward to this talk. And then I want to add that Integral has brought us together, because we were talking about integral topics before we got to know each other and before we had any interest to each other. So we are especially grateful to Ken Wilber and integral theory.
Exactly. Indeed we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what we like to ask, I have to say, there is Margherita today.
Yes, please say something about your friend Margherita, our friend Margherita.
I'm very grateful that there is Margherita today. She is my co-host for the other show, Connections Forum, which goes live Thursday, 4 o'clock our time. That will be Margherita, 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern time, I think. And we are talking about topics there which are less grounded in theory, let's say, but they are always intended to help people to create a better life, at least for themselves, if not for all their surroundings. Thank you, Margherita, that you are here and are helping us out for this show.
My pleasure.
Yeah, right.
Would you like to ask first, Nicholas, if he wants to talk a little bit about himself, maybe? We have
most people do like to talk about themselves.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't think Nicholas is an exception. So, who are you, Nicholas, and why are we talking to you?
Actually, I would like to add before you begin, we got to know you by a series you did with Skype interviews, which then you posted on your website. And we listened to quite a bit of them, and you had amazing people there and amazing topics. And this brought us to you. And in our our how do you say, in our circuits of people we would like to have on our show.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Mhm.
Well, thank you both very much for having me, and also hello, Margherita. Well, how can I answer that? I'm a psychiatrist. I live in London, and I've spent the last 13 years putting Western civilization on the psychiatrist's couch, really, in different ways. How would I say that it started out? Well, actually, it probably started out age 10. I remember sitting in my lounge in my parents' house, and we lived just outside London, and I had lots of encyclopedias and books out, and I've been studying things, and I had what in Britain we would call a Cecil Rhodes moment, which, if you don't know British imperial history, wouldn't mean very much. But I think he said something like, and this was 110 years ago, that an Englishman has won the lottery in life, roughly, in more eloquent language. And I pretty much came to the same conclusion, age 10. I thought, how lucky I am to be born, into a nice family, into a pleasant home, into a fantastic country in Europe, and not only that, but in the best parts of it, and in the best possible time to be alive. And I must say it was downhill ever since. Because I realized that obviously I'd been infected with both a sort of a modernist perspective and also an old imperialist perspective, and that most of the people around me didn't share those. And yes, and so I suppose in the 1970s I saw, sadly, a lot of social decay really around me, a lot of the old structures collapsing of family and authority, and lots of the old ways of being were just being mocked. And I felt quite insecure with that. There was a lot of crime, a lot of graffiti, a lot of the places in the inner city my parents had come from had suddenly become full of immigrants, and there was lots of crime and anti-white racism there. And yeah, I suppose fast forward a few years into a post-medical school, and I was doing, as a junior doctor, I was doing psychiatry, and again, I mean, this is the negative stuff. So this is the pain, this is the pain that makes you go to see the doctor, and I was horrified by the way that our medical system was run, and in particular the way that psychiatry was done. It was just such a machine model. It was run not as a human system caring for people, but it was run really as a state bureaucracy in which everyone was a number on a spreadsheet and so on. And the psychiatry was very much about pushing pills and, kind of endlessly doing risk assessments rather than really caring for people in a holistic way. So both of those things kind of made me think, we needed to put it right. And so I set myself out to be a consultant in the psychology, in what I called organic leadership. And the idea was to see how we could rejuvenate our organizations and bring them back to life and run them in line with human nature. And so I was busy doing that, doing lots of projects and so on. And then September the 11th happened. I was in the middle of an MBA at the London Business School and watched that live on television. And I'd always been a bit of a nerd, a bit like some people are train spotters. I was a bit of an international relations and politics nerd from a young age. And rather insanely, I decided that we needed to do our foreign policy differently in a much more psychologically intelligent way. And so I launched myself, when I finished the MBA, launched myself as a consultant in the psychology of foreign policy, and spent about 6 months taking everything I knew from psychology, from psychotherapy, from anthropology, sociology, and so on, all the kind of the human things, and applied that to the world of diplomacy. So, for example, I went to the British Embassy in Syria and did a a study interviewing lots of people in the British-Syrian relationship, studying the psychology of that, and then using the psychotherapeutic way of thinking to see how can we improve the relationship, both in a kind of a nice, loving, spiritual way, but also in a manipulative carrot and stick type way. And anyway, I just finished doing a psychological counterterrorism strategy for our House of Commons, and I'd submitted that to their committee on counterterrorism. And while I was doing that, I realized that our focus was on them. So our focus was on them, the terrorists, or them, the Muslims. You know, what can we do to make them behave differently and do stuff differently? And of course, that's a very legitimate way of thinking. But I realized that we had missed the biggest thing that you can do in a relationship to influence others, and that's to change ourselves, and at the very least to be conscious and aware of ourselves. And when I sort of turned the camera backwards to look at us in the West, us, not just the British, but us, the West, I realized that, you know, we don't even know who we are anymore. We don't know what's right and wrong. We don't know. We've lost sight of our identity. We're not clear what we believe anymore, and so I thought that put us in a very weak position in a relationship. So I then set about examining us, the psychology of us, and I started off in an area of authority, actually, which linked back to my preoccupations from childhood, because I'd noticed that over generations, authority had been collapsing and had been attacked. So the authority of the police, of the military, of teachers, of doctors, just traditional authority had come under a great deal of assault. And I wanted to work out, you know, both why and what we could do to rejuvenate it in a healthy way. And I set about interviewing lots and lots of people from a huge range of different walks of life. I started actually with my grandparents, who were in their 90s, asking them questions throughout their life history, you know, from their teachers and their parents all the way through the different social ages they've been through, about how authority works and so on. And I did that with lots of military people, so from captains of ships to infantry soldiers, teachers and nurses. And anyway, the point was that I interviewed a huge range of different types of people from different countries as well. And what became abundantly clear really quickly was that in spite of that huge diversity, they were all singing from the same hymn sheet. It was like I was talking to the same person, whether it was my grandparent or a policeman or a teacher. They were all saying the same things. I mean, I won't go into the detail of what they were saying about authority and the way it had changed, but the point was I realized, I got it, I sensed it, that I was talking actually to fractals in a conscious living system, and that each of us are actually parts not only of ourselves and our family and our community and our countries, but I mean, obviously at a certain level we're global, but we're very certainly Western. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, global we are, because I want to acknowledge a little bit the people who have shown up to listen to us. Here, the latest arrival is Breitbart. Then there is Ruth Ann, Candy Xavier Sakai, she is from Tokyo, she is really far away. Then there is Audrey Christie, and there is Melanie Hall, who we know very well. And there were others around, Jeremy Murphy, Abbas Gotzi, and Peter Nena, Misty Camacho, probably. Yeah. Excuse me if we don't pronounce the names right. Then Barbara Quick will go to the replay city and listen to what you tell us. And then there is a person, let me see if I get it right, Abdelwahed Saidi. And he posted comments, and I hope he will be here too. And then Michael Thomas said he would come, and Noemia Chertosimoes, and Sue Eston, and Donald Brandt, and Then we come
Oh,
down to
it says-
Nicholas Beecroft. I think that's you.
Nicholas Beecroft is watching too. Good. All right.
You know, maybe it's not a dumb question because I'm in the role to ask the more dumb questions today because I'm not so much into social politics and all these things. But what you were talking about, it reminds me in relationships. We always have the other has to change, the other has to change, the other has to change. How can we make him or her behave?
Yeah.
You
Here.
behave differently.
Yeah.
So it seems to be in the little world in which we are living in the same thing as with between nations.
Absolutely. Actually, there's a link there to the project I did in Syria. I was in the British Embassy there, and the ambassador gathered together kind of representatives of all the different strands of Syrian society, and he'd asked me to facilitate a dialogue between them and between all the different representatives of the British government there, and so I did that. And at the end of it, just to wrap up, I ran round each single person. There were probably about 20 people there, and I asked the question. Each person had to say, what was it? Two things. One, what can Syria do to improve the British-Syrian relationship? And what can Britain do to improve the Britain-Syria relationship? And it was actually really funny. In the end, everyone laughed because after about 5 people, the pattern became really clear that each person from which either country would be really clear about all the things the other country needs to do. They need to do this, they need to do that, and they need to do it. And always, every single person, I mean, towards the end, people were getting it, but say for 2/3 of the way through, every single person forgot to say what the other country, what their own country should do differently. And it was absolutely fascinating because when they had to answer that question, they all looked completely blank. Including the ambassador, none of them had ever considered the question of what our country can do to improve it. And I suppose that's really what Analyze West and the new Magna Carta are about, turning that lens back on us.
Absolutely. And this is the beginning of real change when we understand our contribution to the story which is created outside. So really good. Let me first bring some comments to what you have talked before up. There is the Breitbart. Margherita, can you bring it up? It is about rejuvenating authoritarian structures, or rather abandoning that paradigm altogether. This is a question.
Is it the one or the other? Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you want to answer, or first I bring up the other question?
I can't remember. I'm male, so I can't multitask.
Okay.
About rejuvenating authoritarian structures. Well, hello, Doug. Is it about rejuvenating authoritarian structures or abandoning that paradigm? I'd say, well, neither. I'd say if by authoritarian you mean structure, discipline, order, a command structure, someone in charge, rules, regulations, etc., then, well, those things have their place. And so the question is more, are those things healthy in their manifestation? Are they effective in the way that you're using them, specifically in a particular context? So it doesn't make sense. I think actually, you know, say on the question of authority, one of the things that we've done, one of the core pathologies that we have, is that we've looked at how power was abused in the past. So, for example, how you know, white people abuse their power, or how men abuse their power, or teachers, or scientists, or religious people. You know, any traditional authority structure. In the 1960s, people, well, I mean, it's obviously over a longer period, but it became very popular then. you know, people began to say, oh my God, you know, we've really abused this authority in the past. And it's led to all kinds of, you know, in the extreme to the Holocaust or to slavery and so on, or it's led to men dominating women and so on. And in any area of life, you could show that, you know, how the police have abused their power and so on. And I think there's one of the core issues is that there's a healthy way to deal with that and there's an unhealthy way to deal with that. The healthy way to deal with that is to go, oh, right, yes, authority and power has been abused. Let's look at that, let's explore it, let's unpick it and work out how to do this better in a healthy, positive and effective way. In some ways we've done that. In other ways we've not done that at all. And what we've done is we've said that actually all power is wrong, all authority is wrong, that power is always abused, and then we've gone to the extreme of saying you mustn't have any power at all, or anyone with any power can't speak, or which is actually, and at the core of it is the failure to deal with those emotional wounds around whatever, around race or men or age or whatever. And one of the real things that we need to do is to overcome that, because if you take the example of race and the abuse of power, what we've said is, you know, clearly, historically, white people, you know, over the last few centuries were racist, or at least some of them were in some circumstances, and that's been structurally imposed on other parts of the world through imperialism and slavery and so on. And a healthy way to deal with that would be say, all right, okay, yes, right, we're all one human family, everyone is really equal, there's nothing much in the genetics of it, we should treat all human beings equally and fairly and enable everyone to fulfill their potential. And we should avoid having prejudices, of course. That's a healthy way to deal with it. The unhealthy way to deal with it is to do what a lot of people have done, which is instead saying, oh my God, white people are evil, white people are bad, every new white child that's born must carry on its shoulders the burdens of every crime ever committed by a white person, and then we must infantilize all of the non-white people, all of the other people, and treat them as victims, and as poor little victims who need to be patted on the head. And I mean, that's ridiculous and it's sick. And it's one of the biggest obstacles, actually, to us actually healthily going to a post-racial global society. You know, it's stopping us from healthily integrating newcomers to our countries and to be positive.
I think you've reached, you know, a real core theme of your book. You know, how to correct the things that are really going wrong without reverting to the older, cruel black and white ways of dealing with all these problems. Not that the black and white ways are always wrong, necessarily, but we need to look at the world with much more discernment and much more. And while we enjoy all the sensitivities and that postmodern people have brought into the arguments, we can't let the sensitivities themselves, you know, determine what's the next best move. We've got to remember that we are capable of acting in all the ways we have always acted, you know, and we don't just want to let any of those earlier ways of behaving take over, you know, without us as the new adults in this postmodern age, you know, directing all of this. You know? And I was. Go ahead.
Well, I agree with you, Mark, very much that, you know, postmodernism has been fantastic because it's taken us from the old, rigid, hierarchical and traditional ways of seeing things, or the very corporate scientific way, and it's exploded us into complexity, seeing that there are lots of different ways of seeing the world, and that's fantastic, and it's essential. You know, it's vital for our survival to be able to do that. But the problem is that what we've done is we've so disintegrated and kind of, what's the word, we've so, what's the French word? I'm trying to think of what do they say? So deconstructed ourselves, but we've not
Yes.
put ourselves back together again, and so we've lost that healthy core. And something that we need to do is to bring that together. We need to bring left and right back together. We need to bring masculine and feminine healthily together. And you would see that in the way that we could do politics by getting beyond the culture war and having rather than say in the area of crime, someone has committed a serious crime. The Conservative will say whip them, beat them, punish them. The Liberal will say, oh, rehabilitate them. The Socialist will say, look for the causes of poverty and so on that have caused their problem. The Christian will say, forgive them. There's all these different ways. And it's actually ridiculous, because we should do all of those really well. And all our energy is spent, each of those groups fighting each other to try and impose their one narrow way of doing it. A healthy society would do
That sounds so hard. It sounds so hard. Well, every problem is so complicated. We need some simple way out of all of this. So, we can go to bed at night and sleep, and not stay awake, finding all the...
I want to come in. Yes. There's many interesting comments, and I want to bring up one, which is too long to be seen on the screen. But you can read it, yeah, please.
This is from Ruth Ann Purchase, who identifies herself as a member of an Indian tribe in Delaware, who says, we as a tribe have no official recognition, but we do now have a census district, so that for the first time in history we are allowed to put our ethnicity on the census in 2010, the last one. My point in bringing this up is that we are not Western. We do not like what the West has done to our culture, whitewash it, and we long to disassociate from religions that funded our obliterations. At the same time, we long to restore our language and culture while still recognizing we are all fractals of one living organism. Do you have good examples of international relationships sharing one soil? How do we separate in honoring ways in order to reconnect in healthier ways? Okay, that's enough. Yeah, there's a little more. That's a mouthful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth Ann. Can you see that comment?
It's gone.
Oh, would you like me to reply?
Well,
yes.
What you can remember of it.
Well, it's hard to reply to that. The fact is that Western civilization went to North America, and through its strength in technology and organization and numbers, pretty much eradicated and ethnically cleansed and dominated and destroyed what was there before. And that's sad. That there's something that's been lost there. And that's part of the story of Western civilization. I would say it's important to point out that that's part of all civilization. If you look at what happened in China before, the thousands of years of history they've had, or what happened in Southern Africa before the Central Africans turned up. Unfortunately, that is part of human history that happens. On the positive side, what I would say is that there are a lot of people that talk in a very patronizing way about North American, sorry, forgive me, I don't know the right, I'm British, so I don't know the right PC terms, but if North American Indian is the right term, or whatever, Native Americans, a lot of people talk about it in a very patronizing way, like there's some kind of sacred, pure, noble savages, and then the evil people turned up and everything was bad. I think that's ridiculous. But I think what the few remaining really ancient traditional cultures have got to teach us is one of the, well, if I can say, one of the other core problems in Western civilization is exactly what you've said, and it is that in our hearts we've died, in our spirit we've lost our spirit, we've lost our humanity, and that part of that has come about actually through our strengths. So if you look at science and capitalism, what we've been brilliant at doing in that is dividing the world into small objects, and each of those objects have properties, and then we have used scientific theory and experiment to work out how they interact with each other and how better to manipulate the world, and we've created all the amazing science and technology that we have. And obviously capitalism has harnessed that and put value on the things that you can measure in the spreadsheet through a number, and likewise has been the most amazing motor for humanity, for not humanity, for human potential. But, and there's a big but, the downside of that is that we've lost all of those things, or we've not paid attention to those things that you can't put a, or at least not can't, but are not easy to put a number on. So care, love, community, security, family, trust. There's a long list of all of these fundamental human things. And those aren't easy to measure in a scientific study, and they're not easy for a company to put a shareholder value on. And actually, you know, if you look at that sort of loss of spirit, that loss of humanity, you can see that in the way that we run our organizations like machines, or you can see that in the way that we do medicine, often in a very non-holistic and uncompassionate way. And when Osama bin Laden sent those people to fly those planes into the towers and into the Pentagon in America, in New York and Washington, he said very clearly that he was sending us, I forget the exact language, but it was something like sending a spear into the heart of Western civilization, because he knew that at the core we were weak, and at the core in our hearts we'd lost our soul. Now, as evil as those people were in their actions, there's something in that message. And what I'd say to the lady who said what's happened to the North American Indians, absolutely right, you know, really that's awful, but I wonder how much we can salvage from that. And I think a lot of the remaining non-Western cultures, I don't really mean, you know, mainstream Iran or mainstream China, but just around the edges, the last remaining people who still live like human beings have done for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years, they've got a lot to teach us about how to reintegrate. So in science, how to reintegrate wisdom and judgment and instinct. You know, just imagine if we could do science and capitalism with the same wisdom that a native Amazonian warrior understands his rainforest. If we could apply that, if we could bring our bureaucracies to life, just imagine how we could transform the world for the better.
Well, Ruth Ann actually asked in her question at the end if you knew of any place where that kind of fruitful win-win cooperation was going on, where a traditional culture and a more modern culture were actually thriving today.
I think I have to say I'm not an expert on that. I have seen some examples of that on television and on the internet, but I don't have any personal experience of that, so I can't say, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
I would like to come in and say hello to other people. There's Santiago Ruiz and Lawrence Gold, and then there is our friend from Baku, Naira Rustamova. We are really international today. And there are a lot of questions. I don't even know if you can answer to all of them, but I would like you to come back on the comment page and answer to the people.
After the show.
After the show, sure.
Yeah,
Not
I'll try and keep me on my toes. I'll try and answer more quickly.
Okay, let's see.
To answer as many as possible.
Well,
Whoops. It's gone just now.
Well, we are on the wrong page at the moment.
No, I clicked on the wrong thing. Okay, here is Melanie. Really at the beginning, she asked, do you feel that there is an ebb and flow per generation as how they view authority? Either a generation embraces it or dismisses it. Your thoughts?
what a brilliant question, Melanie. Well, you know, just in saying, just speaking to my grandparents, you could get them to map out the way that authority has changed over their life. The quick answer is definitely yes. And I think if I directed you to one thing, if you have a look at the Future of Western Civilization project, which is at futureofwesterncivilization.com, you'll see, I think it's interview number 20 I did, was with a chap called Neil Howe. And he's done the most fantastic research based on a theory that he has of the cycling of generations. And I won't say the whole lot in great detail, but they basically have seen that there's a pattern going over history. Initially, they did it with British and American history for about 500 years. But they've now shown they've done it in the Arab world and in China and so on. And it seems to be quite robust. And there is a cycling of this, of what he calls the fourth turning of different types of generations. And the reason I got in touch with him, so there were 4 different types of generation. The hero generation, who kind of step up and change the world when a crisis hits. I've forgotten the name of the next generation. They're the ones that kind of get on with it and make things work after the crisis. And then there's the prophet generation, the counterculture generation, who turn everything on its head, or not quite, but begin to swing to the spiritual and the inner and the group, the me approach. And then there's my generation afterwards, the nomad generation, who grew up in the chaos caused by the previous generation. And then then actually the people who were born, they call them the millennials now. They're the ones who are going to be the new hero generation, according to his theory, who are going to have to step up to, deal with the absolutely vast crises that we're just about to go into. So yes, certainly authority changes enormously across time and generation according to circumstance.
Wonderful. And I have forgotten to say hello to Cindy. Cindy, glad you are here. There is another question from
Doug?
Yeah, do you want to read that? Or a comment more?
All right. Doug Breitbart writes, consistent with the fractal nature of a globally connected, common-centered collective, could not a non-competitive, non-industrial era paradigm that is systemic and holonic, as is the model of holacracy, for example, there actually is no authority structure, replacing institutional authority relative to the individual with empowerment of all, responsibility distributed and accepted by all, as individual actors and members of a collective at the same time. And then he writes more.
This is just this. From an ecosystemic orientation, there is no authority exhibited in nature.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. We have authority.
It's to define authority. I mean, a parent has authority. Actually, could you put the comment just up again, because there were several different bits of it. Thanks for that, Doug. I think there are different angles on that. On one, I think that if what you're saying is, are we going towards a global, interconnected, conscious living system? I mean, we already are that, actually, but we're ever increasingly becoming like that, more and more so, and becoming more conscious of it. And in that kind of way of operating, certainly it is systemic. It is, you wouldn't necessarily need a top-down kind of structure for example, how you run healthcare or how you distribute education or whatever. You know, it doesn't need to be top-down and center outwards. And I think, you know, for example, the way I've looked at our bureaucracies, the way we need to rehumanize those, one of those is certainly the way you're describing is really to align it with natural living systems. And that means less of that top-down machine model, absolutely. But, and there is a but, I don't think it's right to say that we'll go to some non-competitive world, because competition is part of human nature. You know, it's simply unrealistic that so is cooperation and so is collaboration, but it is an intrinsic part of human nature. I think sorry, Mark, go on.
We do both. We collaborate and work together, and we also compete.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I've had one slightly weird example of this. Do you remember how, Britain, of course, in a very thuggish way, took Hong Kong from the Chinese, but then over a century and a half, Hong Kong demonstrated Western civilization to the Chinese. It showed that it wasn't about race, it wasn't about religion, that if you took the formula of those rules, those structures, those processes of capitalism, the rule of law, of education, not really of democracy, but of a democratic open culture, and applied to that the amazing entrepreneurship of the Chinese people, you got, wow, bang, the most amazing transformation. And obviously, if you remember, Deng Xiaoping looked at that and he thought, I want a bit of that, great, let's learn from that and apply it. And one thing that he did that we can learn from coming backwards was he basically said to the peasants, the Chinese peasants, that from now on you can keep the profit, you can keep your surplus once you've provided the socialist target to the state. If you make any more grain or more crops or animals or whatever, you can keep it and do what you like with the money. And that was the point at which competition came in and motivation and energy, and suddenly, boom, everyone knows, you don't need me to say, the most incredible transformation of the Chinese people. Not with a huge number of downsides, of course, but nevertheless, overall, probably a transformation for the better. Now, if we take that principle back to us now, in our rather, in some ways, backward Western countries, we've got what is a fantastic welfare system. Obviously, it differs country to country, and in some places it's great, and in others it's weaker. But certainly in the European countries, there's a very strong welfare system, and that's wonderful. And talking with my grandparents, they grew up when such a thing didn't exist, and there was serious poverty, and so we're very, very fortunate to have that. But, and it's a big but, because partly because we've done it in an industrialized, top-down machine model way, and partly because it's infected with the victim triangle of victim, perpetrator, and rescuer, we've created a situation in which lots of people at the bottom end on benefits are trapped so that if they can't, they have to kind of work the system and play the system to get the benefits. But if they then show energy, competition, entrepreneurship, creativity, and start to work and earn money, the system punishes them and takes their benefits away. And I reckon that one quite innovative thing that we can do is to actually learn from the great old communist Deng Xiaoping and say, I don't know quite how we'll do it, but to say that, so people on benefits, if you earn extra money, if you show creativity, if you show entrepreneurship and dynamism, you don't lose your benefits. You can keep those, you keep the profit. And I reckon if we did that, we would empower and liberate huge numbers of people out of poverty, and actually the net good to human potential would be better. But obviously you'll challenge me on the practicality, but there are some countries who are beginning to experiment with that.
Yeah, you are talking about the guaranteed income.
Yeah,
for everybody.
We don't know how to do it yet, but it's something to experiment with because it's really potentially powerful.
They did some experiments, I think, in local areas, and it didn't shut down the entrepreneurship. No, it was really, because so many people think when everybody gets money from the state, they wouldn't do anything anymore and just only stay in the sun and make holidays. But the opposite was the case in the experiments.
Well, I might do that.
You might. I wouldn't.
No, but it was wonderful. They do have some localities where this has been tried, and crime decreased, and the whole atmosphere of the community changed. And
but it was done because somebody very rich gave the money.
Yeah.
It was not the state.
Yes, and of course that's what we'll ask. Where will the money come come from.
Okay,
But
let's go
anyway.
on. We have still other comments. Would you like to see another comment, Nicholas?
Oh, certainly, yes, please, yeah.
Okay,
All right.
from Lawrence.
All right.
Would you like to read it?
Sure. Lawrence is someone we work closely with, and so we always pay attention to what he says. He says, there's a difference between authoritarian and authoritative. Authoritarian places authority elsewhere and rides on its coattails, appropriating authority for themselves, as in priests of the Middle Ages deriving authority from the church. To be authoritarian is to be right because associated with the author, authoritarian. Authoritative originates authority in oneself with integrity, as in the developer of any new technology who shares the new development. To be authoritative is to be the author, or to have internalized the basis for being an authority.
To me, when I can begin to say something, it reminds me of natural hierarchy as opposed to power hierarchy. So I can be authoritative in one area of life while you are in another one, and it's not that only because I am the boss of everything.
Yeah,
you know?
we know about that too. Okay, yeah.
Okay,
anyway.
over to you.
Yeah, well, I agree with that, Lawrence. While you were talking, my mind, as often it does, went tangentially to religion, because religion was obviously a very traditional form of authority, the kind of externally imposed authority, either from religious hierarchies or from the books or the traditions. And something that we've had in the West recently is, if you like, particularly in Europe, you know, we've deconstructed religion, and we've been through a materialist phase, we've been through a very scientific phase, and so on, lots of different developmental stages, and many of us are simply not traditional religious people anymore. Many would be just materialists or postmodern people that haven't got a clue, or spiritual but not religious, and so on. But what's happened is that part of that reaction to the abuse of past power and the sensitivity about wanting to be kind and not abuse power and authority is that we've become very shy about setting boundaries and about making assertions. And actually, if we want to think of ourselves as a natural living system, as human beings, setting boundaries is a fundamental part of human nature, of being safe, of being healthy. And because, particularly in Europe, we've had, since the war, well, not even the war, since the 1960s, but particularly since the 1990s, we've had a massive influx of people from Muslim countries. And so whilst the native European people are kind of mostly post-religious, materialist, or don't really care, we've had a massive influx of people who strongly believe in religion. Obviously, they're not all the same, but the center of gravity in that group is much more towards traditional absolutist beliefs, and some of them quite fundamentalist. And this is a massive challenge to our law and our freedom. Actually, we're having our freedom of speech attacked. We're having not just the security issues, but we're having people with very strong religious beliefs trying to take over our schools and impose their ideology, impose their ways. And because we've become very sensitive, lovely, postmodern, I would say, I would use the word pseudo-liberal because it's not really liberal, but incapable of making, saying what's good and bad, what's true and false. And so one of the things that we need to do to sort ourselves out is to be willing to make assertions about what is right and wrong, and to be willing to set boundaries. And around immigration, for example, setting a healthy boundary that we don't just have an open border that anyone who likes can come. We're a club, we're a team, we're a family, we're a group consciousness. And if you want to come and join us, you know, great. But we need to select as to who we want to become a member, and on the basis of what skills they bring and whether they will respect our culture and our way of life, not like the people who turned up in North America, as the lady pointed out earlier. You know, And so we need to say that people who come here must believe in democracy, must believe in the rule of law. They have the freedom of religion, but if the freedom of religion means that other people have the freedom to have another religion or disagree with you or even laugh at your religion or mock it or think it's ridiculous. And people who don't have the maturity or the developmental level to accept that don't belong in the West. And we need to be strict about that and be willing to exclude them and to invite them to those who have those extremist and absolutist, fundamentalist, traditional and bigoted views to find an alternative home. And that's entirely liberal and entirely kind and entirely natural. And that's a form of authority that we need to restore. As well as welcoming those newcomers to become happy team members, to join us and learn from them. You know, we're on a journey towards an evolving global civilization, and that civilization will need to have rules and boundaries and discipline.
You are talking really a hot topic here, and I'm glad that you said this in these very clear words, because we cannot accept that, as in Germany, a Turkish woman was killed by her brothers because she wanted to be with a German guy. This is just, you cannot say, oh, leave them their culture. When people come in our cultures, they have to accept our laws and our rules. You cannot just kill somebody.
And I think we have to wind down, but I would like to say that those principles are so clear in the new Magna Carta, because that is the club we belong to. You know?
This is his book, to say it to the people. The new Magna Carta is the other book. Oh, here it is.
Yeah, right.
Wonderful.
The advertising
You spend all your time in writing these wonderful books.
Yeah.
And you find them probably in Amazon. Do you have some on Amazon?
Yes, on Amazon.
Go and get them and get more deep into the topic. I'm really happy, Nicholas, that you were here and talked with us about that. And I see with the comments here, our viewers too. There were many appreciative comments here.
Well, thank you very much both for having me. We only scratched the surface there. It's I should have used a crib sheet in case I was lost for words of all the different sort of. It's absolutely vast subject. So we just touched on it there, but I really appreciate the chance to share it, and it's fantastic to be live. Actually, it's really fun. If anyone, I mean, I'm sure there are lots of people listening that haven't made their comment or had their comment aired. You're going to put those on your website, aren't you, Heidi?
Yeah, also on the website, and they still can use here the comment stream to ask the questions, and later on YouTube they can ask questions, and also on our website they can ask questions. So many ways, and for you to answer them.
So we have at least 2 days work for you after you hang up here.
So I have
so that's the weekend, but I'll be happy to have a look. Yes.
To ask you, we didn't put on, it was too late, the lower third, your website. Can you say
yes. Yeah, well, there are several different ones. The easiest one to remember is analyzewest.com. And if you use that, you'll get into the others. But futureofwesterncivilization.com and newmagnacarta.org.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Wonderful. And we want to do some publicity in our own case. First of all, we have created a community, the Wisdom Factory community on G+, and we are happy to invite you there. What you need is your profile photo and make clear that you are interested in these topics, because we don't want anybody who is saying, oh, what you say is all shit. We want to have
our club.
We want to have deep conversations about the topics we are bringing up here. Then the other thing, when we have finished this season, when we have, I think, 4 more or 5 more episodes, then we will have a free training with our friend Lawrence Gold, and you can subscribe for it. Next week, we will give you more information, but keep in mind, there are wisdom technologies with which we can make bigger our potential. The words, always the words that don't come into my mind. How do you say?
Well, anyway,
expand.
Right. That's an excellent word. Yeah.
Expand our possibilities and really become who we really are and do our role in the world, not only for our own lives, but create something like you did.
Mm-hmm.
And we all of us have a little piece to add, to contribute.
Yeah, we're all fractals of that.
Yeah, and then already you can go to the Wisdom Factory DE and download a free book. It is called The Future of Business, and there is Jeff Salzman and Martin Sherrington and a lot of people there who share their wisdom with us. And is it all?
Oh, I don't know, but nobody can remember more than that.
But you see, there is all on our lower and higher third, there are all the URLs, and iAwake, bit.ly/iAwake. There you find the audio technologies for to deepen your meditation practice, for to get rid of stress and all this other stuff.
And I would say,
please click on it.
And I would say that the new Magna Carta is a technology for what we need to do.
Good.
Exactly.
So I didn't read it. You know it. So he is making publicity for you, and it's great. Jump over to Amazon and buy all these books, and then talk to us in the community and say what you think about it. Okay? Everybody, thank you for listening. We had a big house full of wonderful audience guests. Thank you. And next time we will have Jeff Salzman, and he will talk about the gap in between hope and reality in American politics.
All right. And don't go away, Nicholas, after we push the button.
Yeah, actually, if somebody wants to join us in the green room when we have taken off the live broadcast, we will post a link into the comment stream, and you can jump in and ask directly some questions to Nicholas. Okay, and now we shut down. Bye-bye, and thank you.